Great day, Evolutionaries. I want to start this off with a quote from one of my favorite people that ever existed, Miss Toni Morrison, rest in peace. She said, racism feels crazy because it is crazy. Let that melody. Now, I want to talk about history and why it's important. History tends to repeat itself in every pattern of life, no matter what you're looking at, whether it be uh, clothing, styles, economics, uh, anything. History repeats itself. Things happen over and over again, whether it's in a short span of time or a very long span of time. You can expect a repeating pattern in most things in life. So history is important because if you don't study your history, you have nothing, no context to understand the environment of today, the climate of today's environment, I should say. You can't understand what's going on if you don't look back to see, well, what has happened throughout, because humanity doesn't change that rapidly. We're still evolving. So you have to look through history to see why certain things happen. If you see sudden changes happen quick, look through history. You see that it's probably happened before. And right now, we're seeing that, a couple of people have been really campaigning to try to erase the harshest parts of America's history. The Atlantic slave trade. Like, even if you speak about that with ChatGPT in a certain way, it asked me to put a timeline together for me yesterday. And because the timeline they felt would make someone feel uncomfortable, they said it goes against our guidelines. So I asked how, because it said it may be bullying, harassment. Once I had the conversation, it said, well, no, it's not bullying or harassing anyone. Basically, it just essentially said this could be conflict driven because it's showing parts of history that were bad, all carried out by the same people. But it's crazy how much the world caters to that. So I'm talking about that because I'm saying history is important because if the victor is writing history, and you look around the world, you look throughout the timeline of humanity, the victor has been the most savage. They were the ones who were hell bent on conquest, and then they wrote stories about it. There's so many pieces of that puzzle missing that they purposely hide, you know, and it's by people who are undeserving of telling history. People like this guy.
They became works of art in museums because Europeans said it's art. You know, it's not from Africa. It was not art. It was meant to disappear.
It was meant to disappear?
So when we're talking about history, we have to say history is not something that you can leave in the hands of just anyone because they will fabricate it, because there's always motives behind history. And I hate that because I love history and I don't care if I land on the good or bad side of what's going on at that moment. I just like the truth. You know what I'm saying? Like, I understand you're not always on the good side of things. I like the truth. That's it. But they hide the truth because the truth makes certain people feel uncomfortable. Now, recent times, they've been showing all this new information about Neanderthals. They're trying to give them a cognitive makeover and make it seem like the caveman was way smarter than he was. After, I don't know how many years, I'm 50, so I don't know how many years they've been studying Neanderthal. But, all of a sudden he's been found to be something different. Before growing up, Neanderthal had no social skills. They didn't bury their dead. They didn't have tools. None of this stuff was what you thought of Neanderthals. They didn't leave any writings, which all of these things are things that they judge a society, a civilization by, whether or not it's evolved or not. They were definitely portrayed to be unevolved. Now all of a sudden, they're seeming smart. Me being a Scorpio, I use my detective skills as I typically do when I feel like something is fishy. So I said, let me see, why is this happening? Because every morning I wake up and I look at the news feed, bam, there's stories about the Neanderthals and this great leap in cognitive possibilities of what they were able to do back then. And that was never the case. So I started thinking, I started putting two and two together, see if it can come up to four. And I thought about it. I did a DNA test possibly 6, 7 years ago, 5, 6 years ago. Found out who my biological father was, found out who my siblings were. It was a beautiful thing. So now we have this new thing where people are getting their DNA and it's showing the stark contrast in humanity. Like they want to say we're all one. Yeah, we're all one because we're all one race and we should all love each other on this planet. That's never been the case. But we're divided by cultures, we're divided by skin colors, language, all types of different stuff. My DNA kind of fills in some of the gaps, right? So when I did my DNA test and found out I was 84% West African, I was happy, but I was a little mad because of the percentage of European that was in there. I didn't expect. I wanted to see 100% African when I looked at it, But seeing that our people were Africans born in America, our story was a little bit different. But then I searched through to see what else is in here. So I get to the very bottom and it said Neanderthal DNA. And I'm like, oh no, my heart drops. I hope I don't have this. And then it said negative 0.002 traces. I cheered, but I also felt sad at the fact that there's even traces in there. But negative 0.002, I don't know how that even registers on a meter of Neanderthal, which is, it's very clear, a different species from Homo sapiens. So if you're African, if your blood is 100% African, you are 100% Homo sapien. Everything else is some form of a hybrid. It's a science, look it up. So the Neanderthal now, them being such a different species as Denisovans were, who also occupied, this place at the same time, they're different species in a sense. They're still humanoids and they're close, but they're not the same. For instance, like I can't remember if it was the female or the male with the Neanderthal. They couldn't mate with humans. They wouldn't, nothing could come out of it. I think it was the male, maybe, and the female could. But either way, they were a different species. And when some of my white friends and partners started doing DNA tests, they got results that were extremely different in that area. It was saying 4%, 5%. I seen a guy on YouTube say his father was 9%. My blood said 14% European. So I'm thinking 9% is a lot. And that was like mixed up between Greece, Ireland, the UK, wherever the colonizers and enslavers came from that were part of my lineage. That was in there. I saw that. So I thought to myself, 9% is a lot. 5%, that's a lot. Because that's not talked about. And it probably would answer a lot of questions if we started to study that. But I'm saying all that to say, once again, you have to be careful with what you read because history is written by the victor. Stories are changed, narratives are created, all based off motives. And that's why we have to write our own story as much as possible because we've allowed other people to put it in their hands and they write it to their benefit. That's why we have things like African artifacts in Europe still, and Europeans are trying to justify why they're still there. It is, for lack of better terms, batshit crazy. It makes zero sense. So we have to take charge, and I'm talking to Africans worldwide because unlike a lot of others, I don't see that separation. Culturally, I don't see that separation when it comes to us being Africans. We're all Africans. Because people, I understand some of the frustration lately. I've seen some of the funny skits, like, between African Americans, as they call us. I don't consider myself that. I'm an African who was born in America, but, and Africans who were raised in the UK and them taking jobs over here. Like, it's been a big conversation. But genetically, when we start doing genetics, history will show that we're not different, really. We have different cultures. But that same law could apply if you took a guy who grew up in the Bronx and took a guy who grew up in Miami. Their cultures are nothing alike. Their language is nothing alike. Their views on life, their perspective may be nothing alike. But genetically, they go get pricked and do DNA, they'll be a lot alike. Remember that. We are one. So Teach that to the kids. Don't let history fall to the side and not be important. Because if not, other people are going to continue to write our story, and we will continue to be left behind as they continue to do throughout history. Salute.